And we're live. Today we've got Mr. Peter Megaw with Prismo, Michael Gray, Agentis, and Michael Konnert, Vizsla Mining. So welcome, gentlemen. Very happy to have you here. We've been talking about this for a while, setting something like this up. It's our first, what is this, menage a four? Menage a quattro? We're talking Mexico. We're talking silver. How's the show? We're in Beaver Creek.
Beautiful rainy Beaver Creek.
Yeah.
Well, it's been beautiful up until today.
Yeah.
I think it's a busier show this year than other years, or no? What's your gauge? Because for me, I kind of felt like there's a lot of people, but
It's unquestionably the biggest they've ever had.
yeah,
The number of companies and the number of attendees.
There's 240 companies this year presenting or having one-on-ones. And the first year they did it about 10 years ago, it was 115. So you're right.
I was there then. I've been here for every single one of them. So
it's definitely the biggest.
I could feel it down at like the common areas, the lunchtime and everything else. It's like it just feels super stuffed.
Yeah, and the swag has just disappeared.
Yeah.
It's always a good sign. Yeah. Sign of a bear market, perhaps. Yeah. Replacing the pens for free. That's right. But interesting because this is the first year that they've done the battery metal component. So they actually opened up the conference with a battery metal panel. And had energy transition companies there too.
I heard they're going to do their own battery metal.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Maybe a separate thing.
It's probably interesting.
Battery metals are wonderful, but you really need the silver to make all the stuff work in the first place. So,
that's right.
Let's play with what brung us here.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and that was my comment. I was on that panel, and I tended to go straight towards silver, as I often do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's your thesis on silver? Well, let's start here. What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of there's been in the last couple of years a lot of momentum on the whole silver thing. Eric loves silver. We've heard lots of people, and even on the backs of that, what was it? The big EMC
silver squeeze.
Yeah, the silver squeeze thing, like all that happening.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people were hunting around for the the latest and greatest. And Peter, you've been in the silver game for a very long time.
Longer than I care to think of it.
Yeah. And so have you seen like a resurgence in interest in silver? Do you think that vis-a-vis projects, financings, etc.?
Well, financings have been fraught for a year or so, but there's certainly a lot more projects out there. Not necessarily lots of good projects, the ones we're involved with here. But
that was going to be my next question. You think it's kind of, filling up with a lot of stuff that doesn't really have a whole lot of potential? And where should one look? Let's say you're a retail investor. Where's the most likely place to find a quality silver asset? Mexico.
25% of all the silver mined in human history has come from Mexico.
Yep.
And of the 15 deposits around the world that have produced 1 million ounces of silver or more, 8 of them are in Mexico. So it's unquestionably where to be for silver. More fundamental than that, though, for any investor is to look for grade that, less than 250, 300 grams of silver, real silver, not silver equivalent, probably going to struggle. So get over that threshold before you worry about anything.
And I was very fortunate. Very few silver companies I covered in my career. Mag Silver was the first one. And I got to know that bar that you set in terms of grade being super important and continuity and the low intermediate sulfidation vein field model in terms of having legs in the Fresnillo district. And so that was kind of the foundation for me as an analyst, learning about those silver-rich systems, intermediate sulfidation systems.
What about Peru? I mean, I've seen some stuff at Peru. I mean, certainly companies like Hochschild Mining and stuff have carved out quite the century plus of mining history and established on the backs of many of these epithermal kind of silver projects. Arcata, which I think is now shut down, and some other things. I think the grade range is within what you're saying.
It's the same basic geologic environment. It's the same subduction arc related volcanism. Peru is probably number 2 in the world in terms of historic production.
Yep.
So, it doesn't seem to have as many supergiant deposits as Mexico.
Yeah. And I guess what should investors look at in terms of widths. So we've got the grade established. What's a critical width to go with that?
Well,
250, 300
so topical now, right? With some recent challenges in the silver space in Mexico with narrow vein mining. Width is very important. We have talk about Vizsla later, but we're fortunate to have wide widths in the Panuco district in Sinaloa. But I mean, Meg is known for widths as well too, right?
Yeah, 5 to 30 meters. That's reasonable. You don't get that everywhere, but sort of mining equipment, the smallest mining equipment that really works efficiently is just under 2 meters wide. So you would like your veins to be wider than off-the-shelf mining equipment.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really important for us. Solid thickness, and if possible, good geometries, right? Gravity fed mining, long hole, open stope, and favorably, unless you get super good thickness. And as you have at Capola, for example, you get great thicknesses and slightly shallower geometries, but you're going to make tremendous margins in those type of environments.
Yeah, I'm asking because I know that a lot of our listeners, they're kind of like many of them, I'm sure, are really interested to take positions in silver names and chase after, things and try to interpret drill results to see if they're positive, negative, or, neutral. And part of that is navigating through, okay, you've provided a functional grade, kind of a base point for them to care, and then coupling that up with things like with width and geometry, things like that. Now, in today's day and age in Mexico, do you think it's still rather underexplored, or do you think there's still a lot of low hanging fruit, or having been there for so long and seeing quite a few things?
Well, I mean, I would argue that what Vizsla has done in Panuco is a textbook example of why Mexico is underexplored. You go back into a district that has 350, 400 years of mining history, and you find blind, totally untouched veins. That's enough. And, that's what happened at Fresnillo. That's what's happened at Bolaños. I mean, it just for all kinds of historic reasons, even the major districts remain underexplored to some extent. And then 60% of Mexico is covered by young volcanics and dirt. So, and they have these big, beautiful trends that run through the country. So modern exploration technology lets you see through cover. Well, it's ridiculous to believe that the majority of Mexican deposits, or anywhere else for that matter, cropped out on the surface.
Well, wasn't Juanicipio kind of a conceptual lock? There's no potential there because of the cover rock and things like that?
Yeah.
What can you talk about the discovery of Juanicipio and that experience? I mean, I think we'd like to.
That'd be a good one.
Well, okay. I mean, in 1995, I was driving back from a project further out in the mountains, and it was late afternoon, and the sun angle was low. And as we were driving, we could see this white stripe across the hills off to the south of us, and went, "What the heck is that? That just looks weird. We've got to go take a look at it." And we drove up this canyon, and here's this 100-meter thick layer of pervasively silicified volcanics, and you go, wow, we're 5 kilometers from Fresnillo. This used to be on top of Fresnillo and got eroded away. If that's true, then there ought to be more of Fresnillo underneath this. And it took us, we had to wait 3 years before the property actually became open, and a friend of mine got it. But it was, from the get-go, you knew there had to be something there. And fortunately, there'd been a huge amount of really good scientific work done in the Fresnillo district that said how deep they had calculated the elevation of the bottom of the silica cap in the historic part of the district based on fluid inclusion work and everything. And we recognized we could put our hand on the bottom of the silica cap in Juanicipio. So it was 350 meters above the top out of the veins in the historic district, and we just measured 350 meters down, picked a structure and put a hole in it, and it was in the first hole.
Wow.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
That's amazing.
Something you'd love to be able to lather, rinse, and repeat, but not likely to happen.
So what was that like? I mean, so you're with, so you did this with a friend? You guys picked this up, or
well,
what was your role in the whole?
I was with a Mexican friend, an associate, and he lived in Zacatecas nearby, and when the property became available, actually went through that standard Mexican liberation and lottery process, and a friend of his got it. He swapped the claim to my friend for a 2-hectare parcel to build a gas station at a highway intersection.
Cool.
And so my friend got the title. I was actually in Zacatecas at the time, and we were bird dogging properties for the original Sunshine Mining Company, and we got it signed up for them within 24 hours. They did all the work, then they disappeared after 9/11, and as soon as clean title came back, we signed it up for MAG on my birthday in 2022. Best birthday present I ever had.
Wow.
Took a few years to figure out that it was the best birthday present I ever had, but it has kept on giving.
Jesus. Yeah, if we could all be so lucky. Oh, wait. No. So what was Vizsla like? How did that?
Well, we consolidated the project from two halves, right? The private Mexican mining companies. And I spent about a year there.
What was your background? Were you?
I'm not technical. I'm a business background. Craig Perry and I had a cobalt business that we sold privately beforehand. And he supported me as a mentor and backed me to do that. And then by selling the cobalt company, we had a bit of pocket change and a small following, I guess, with investors. And I went out and I incorporated Vizsla and spent about a year going around the world. And Simon Smirlik, who runs Ausenco Engineering, dear friend and mentor to me as well. So Craig and Simon were mentors, and I'd go look for projects and bring them back and bird dog projects and see would this fit for Vizsla. At that point, it was going through the IPO process at Haywood, and we were, I think, raising $800,000, $2 million market cap. It was the hardest financing. I was young, no one really wanted to back me, and I remember really grinding that financing out, and then we got it public. It was a few days before my wedding, so I could kind of relax and enjoy that wedding. And so, after about a year or so of kind of looking at projects, I was down in Ecuador. I spent a lot of time in Ecuador. I thought Ecuador looked pretty interesting. Chile, sometime.
Yeah, and Ecuador was kind of hot at that time.
It was.
It's like there was a lot of people who were looking at.
That was like 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
Definitely got scammed out of some money from some gold projects down there in Ecuador. Lost a bit and learned some lessons and things like that, which was, it's always a good way to learn, I suppose. And then a friend of mine, actually, the Roger McClay, who we did the deal with on the cobalt, came to me and said, "Hey, look, there's a guy in Sinaloa that's working on these projects here, and take a look at this deck. This might fit for Vizsla." And so we took a look at it. That was a Friday night. I was in Toronto. I live in Vancouver. I was in Toronto doing some work and having dinner. I looked at this deck. I sent it to Craig, and that Monday or Tuesday, the next week, we were on a plane, direct flight, might I add, from Abbotsford International Airport to Mazatlan. So that was incredible. Like I said, going to Chile and Ecuador and stuff. You're way into the jungle. 6-hour flight, and you're an hour away from our project up a highway. It's just incredible access. We got there, drove through the property. And what we saw was just incredible highway access. Driving through, you could see the alteration on the side of the road, and then we came around this big rhyolite dome over what's called the Animus vein, where I think you worked historically, and drove through this rhyolite just flow dome. I think it's the proper term for it. And I didn't really have to know the technical stuff because I saw what Craig was doing when he saw that, and then I'm like, okay, well, it's good enough for me, you can tell so much by people that are smart, their reaction, right? And so that kind of kicked off the deal that we did with these two families that had been mining there for a decade or so before, and again, Vizsla, $2 million IPO. At that point, I might have had it up to $10 million market cap or something on our BC Copper project, the listing project. But we entered into an option agreement to, for $43 million US to acquire both halves. And everyone thought we were just insane. I remember people laughing at me.
That big balloon payment.
Yeah.
People pause. Yeah.
I'm getting kicked out. Not kicked out, but, I won't say any names, but people, asking me to politely leave their office. They didn't think it was possible. And of course, I didn't have any real track record or anything. Craig, of course, has a huge track record, and so does Simon. But anyways, we brought Charles Funk in, and Charles led that discovery with Carlos Beltran and the team on the project there. Those guys are just superstars. The team we have on the project, the Mexican geologist. And first, we started drilling underneath the ore chutes on Animus, where there's about 100 million ounces of silver we suspect taken out of those 7 ore chutes along Animus. And we had some nice, decent results under Mariposa, which is a huge void, big ore chute there. And we had a couple of other little successes in that center area of the project, but so we were running out of money. COVID hit. I thought the world was ending. This is we were just going all out at this, and we had to shut down drilling. But that gave the guys time to look at the data, look at the regional data, the district data, and when we were allowed to return back to drill, they came up with the idea that, hey, we should go over here to the western part of the district. There's an old adit on Napoleon, and we sampled some multi-kilo stuff at surface. Let's drill under that. Some great guys in the district were responsible for those ideas. And I'll never forget, it was our 6th hole. The second hole we drilled was actually quite good. I think it was 4 meters at 1.8 kilos or something like that, 4.2 meters at 1.8 kilos. But the 6th hole we drilled was just 6 meters at 8 kilos, 8.1 kilos. So in that, there was 100 grams of gold. And it was just incredible. And I remember the feeling of getting that phone call from Charles, because our stock had already done pretty well on the back of that first discovery.
I remember that.
And you remember you mentioned it, the silver squeeze and all this stuff. We were so fortunate with timing.
Your timing was bang on. Yeah.
Like you couldn't plan it better than that. And so we're very fortunate from that aspect in a lot of ways, for making that discovery and then the timing there. But, that really kicked everything off. That hole was just, it sent the stock screaming. 15-cent IPO to $3.50. We raised money from Eric Sprott, For Sale, Franklin Templeton, $30 million that day on that announcement. It was probably the happiest I've ever been. It was so fun.
Happier than the day you got married?
No, second half. There's a few other, my kids as well too. So it's top 5. Let's say top 5 is a smart answer.
Yeah. Everybody wins, Peter. Everybody, the whole family wins, but we win.
And that was just the beginning, right? Now we've just the guys have done such a great job on the work that they've done at the project and the resource that we have now, and it just continues to grow. And I suspect that it's going to be one of these major districts in Mexico in due time.
It's interesting too, because initially you had fantastic results, and as you drilled down plunge, the continuity got better in terms of the banded veins, the brecciation, and the integrity. You had a couple faults in your surface, and that's the inflection point for me. And I said, okay, this is something I need to cover. It's a vein field. And I kind of understood from our lens, at least, that it was getting gold rich in the western part, not as much in the east. That could be, I might not be right on that based on some things
that fits actually with the historic mining in the district. The Copala western end of the district is much more gold rich than the center or eastern.
So it certainly ushered in, similar thesis and vein fields to Mag Silver and Tahoe one time, Story. So, it was exciting to see that.
And we definitely had a lot of criticism and detractors and things like that from the time, because, we had this huge payment, of course, that we ended up we've raised over 200 million for the project so far, but we ended up paying that 43 million property payment. It was supposed to be all in cash. And then as soon as I raised the money to go, and as soon as we raised the money to go pay them, of course, they said, well, maybe we'd like some shares now because it's doing so well. Yeah. We ended up saving some money on that, but fortunately, and our vendors now are still, very strong shareholders, which is awesome because they're, that continuity of them already being there in the district, and so it's but we ended up, going from that discovery to nice, almost a panel of mineralization there at Napoleon, and then that discovery of Copala was unlike anything. I mean, that was just incredible. We didn't see that coming necessarily.
Well, blind too.
Yeah, we literally didn't see that coming. Yeah. And now that's a mile-long structure. It's still open in each direction, 10 meters thick, 33 feet thick on average, and over half a kilo in grade, well over half a kilo in grade.
Now, we can't let Michael Gray get away without his story.
On Vizsla?
No, in general.
In general.
In general.
Well,
How did you get into what you're doing today, Mike?
Well, I'll give the short story. 10 years with senior mining companies, including Falconbridge and Comanco, Black Minerals. And then I co-founded a junior mining company. I like to call it the Good Rubicon. Ran that for 8 years.
Yeah.
It's an intoxicating experience to run a junior mining company.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I have a lot of respect for CEOs.
You had a massive discovery, though.
I was never a CEO per se, VPX, it was CFO. I left actually before the discovery in Red Lake.
Oh, okay.
And pivoted to the mining analyst world. That was in 2005. So my philosophy was to emulate the senior mining companies that were going to be buying assets, look at the junior explorer and developers, and so try to use my lens to look at good geology versus bad. It was almost as simple as that. So Virginia Gold, Eleanor Discovery was first, and then it was a Cisco, Canadian Malartic. We were the first on that name. And it just seemed to click, just using those skills. And I think a lot of geologists could be very good analysts. There's not a lot that get into that world. You'd be a great analyst, Peter, if you ever wanted to go that way. So from that vantage point, I decided really it was best in class type of companies and assets I would cover. And that's one reason why, say on the silver side, I've covered very few. Had to be very selective. Mexico in terms of Mag Silver and Vizsla. Tahoe down in Guatemala was tremendous from a asset point of view. I didn't quite appreciate the country risk, maybe in hindsight. But same thing for the gold side of things and other commodities I've covered in the past, nickel, lithium, potash, things like that. So it's a constant learning process as an analyst. And so I was very fortunate. I think we were on a site visit to Juanicipio, and I think it was just Peter and I. And so I got to understand the anatomy of Juanicipio, the deposit, at an early stage and appreciate these intermediate sulfidation systems, which have legs. They're not just 300 meters or 200 meters vertical window of mineralization.
Deeply rooted.
Go down to 800 meters, plus minus. That was important. And then I had a drive with Peter up to the U.S. border, and we stopped at Cinco de Mayo along the way. And I started to learn about the carbon replacement deposits. So I almost had a 101 course on the way up. And I think as an analyst, one of the key things is to be curious and constantly learning. Some of these assets aren't easy to value until they have a little bit more meat on the bone. But that's really my story in terms of trying to find the best assets, largely ones that are going to be taken out, and sometimes ones that certainly the companies are able to build or stay as Mag Silver did and be a partner on a build.
Well, it was interesting because my foray into capital markets on the buy side as an analyst, coming from the bush as a CEO and not having any real capital markets knowledge at all. And then, of course, you're in Toronto and you're brushing shoulders with people and different analysts and things. And I remember meeting you, and you were a geologist in that role. And as you said, geologists, I think, make great analysts. But a lot of analysts had like a geology degree, maybe, or
and all the way up to the senior mining company analysts. I found that some of the best ones were geologists, first and foremost.
Well, it was rare to actually find. For me, it was almost weird. It was like rare to find. I thought if you were an analyst, you had to be a geologist in some ways. It's like that's what you're analyzing. But there was you and basically Laurie Curtis. I think were the only two that had a substantial career as geologists leading into.
I think it helps a lot because I've found that very few analysts have been executives with junior mining companies and know how hard it is. It's
how hard, exactly.
And so I probably didn't have enough respect coming into the analyst world for how tough it is being an analyst.
Yeah.
And so I can see both sides. I have a lot of respect for the 24/7 and exploration company CEO and executives. Because that's required on multiple fronts. And the analysts, they need to publish and put out thoughtful research, not just respond to news releases, and have a really good investment thesis. Have an opinion, have a conviction. I learned that fairly early on. And eventually went from junior mining companies, explorer developers, and then kind of up into producers. With Macquarie for 9 years, it was covering intermediate companies and some exploration companies. But it's been a lot of fun to continually learn.
And now
especially
your own
good
job.
good projects attract really smart people, and that's how I've really benefited and learned in my career.
Awesome.
What before you got to tell your story. Come on.
Yeah, there we go.
My story. I tell it all the time. It's pure luck. I had I was a geo. I was working in West Africa. I worked for Gold Corp in Red Lake, Kirkland Lake Gold.
That's right.
Tony McCooch and Timmins. That was sort of my foray with Timmins West when we were building that. And then I had a discovery in West Africa with a company called Extra Gold. I had my foray into placer mining. So I had a placer mine, we sold it, made a bunch of money, and then had a second placer mine, lost all my money, and then came back to Toronto. I'm not from Toronto, but I came back to Canada, tail between my legs, broke. Exactly, got a phone call from Pine Tree Capital. They needed an analyst, and I'd met them before on site trips and things, and I was a geo, and I had a job offer from them years prior. So it was kind of an uncanny sort of, phone call. Took that, got my feet wet into Pine Tree towards the end of Pine Tree's existence, really, but just enough to learn the ropes and learn the language of the.
I actually covered Pine Tree as a stock, and that's partly where we got to.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And it was cool because I got to see so many projects. So that was the big thing. I got to fly around and look at, like Mike said, different commodities, different things that were totally out of my comfort zone. I didn't know anything about potash, learned everything about potash, didn't know anything about, anything really other than gold, like any Archean gold.
And the leverage you get going to site as a geologist is, huge in terms of insights.
Yeah, exactly. And I knew some stuff about base metal, but anyway, long short of it, got to travel all over the world, got to see tons of different projects, meet tons of different management teams, but I could always connect with them. I could connect with them on a level of, sometimes they come in and say, "Oh, my directors are so and so," and I say, "Yeah, like, just tell me your story, man. Like, how did you guys get this property? Like, what gets you excited about it? Why are we pumped up? What are we finding here?" And so that was kind of my level on it, and I was able to learn very quickly. And I've got a good memory. I can remember lots of things. And I was taking meetings. That was my mission, was take every meeting every day. Didn't matter what. If the phone call was somebody was doing a roadshow, I'm taking the meeting. And so it was a learning experience. And basically after that, when everything fell apart, was like time to make my own job, because, things were, not good in the mining space. And then, I had the idea that I said, well, I'm going to start an exploration company. I had made enough contacts in the financial world to find some capital, and away we went. And I partnered up with Colin Cattell from Palisades, and he was young and energetic and really had a big appetite for, like, he was one of the only guys at the time that was saying, when everybody was beat up and all the shops were laying off people, he was one of the only guys that was saying, "Denis, do you know how lucky we are? Do you know how lucky we are? I never thought I would see a bull market or a buying opportunity like this in my life. Everything's so cheap." And so that was, I found somebody who was looking at the glass, half full. And so you align yourself with people with that type of, like, optimistic outlook. Right. And so that was really empowering. And away we went. So Newfoundland, I went into cobalt, got a bunch of stuff in cobalt, sold it, took the money, bought more stuff in Newfoundland, Kirkland Lake, Athabasca Basin, Nevada. And so now we've got Nevada King, we've got Newfound Gold, radio fuels, GoldSpot. That was also spun out of that concept of machine learning, data science for mineral exploration. So we sold that last fall to ALS Chemex. And now doing this, we've got CEO.CA, we've got capital, we're investing, and away we go. So this podcast is just a lot of fun. I think it's a great way. My whole thing is, I really want to just take I want to give investors in retail a look at not just, behind the scenes on how maybe I would evaluate a project or how we would talk about, what we look for, but also just allow them to look and connect with the people, because it's a really small group of people in this industry, and a lot of them have fascinating stories. And I think, getting people on here to share that stuff, it's helpful, because there's, investing is really about trust. I came across something a few years back that said that Harvard had done this study, and the number one thing for investors in today's day and age, or people that buy things, is trust. You want to trust your, your internet browser, or trust your, your television company, or whatever it is, your phone company. There has to be trust in everything, right? And particularly in your investments. And they want to be able to connect with people too. And so people invest in people as much as they invest in assets, right? So it's important to give people a bit of a glimpse behind the curtain of, who we are as people and what makes us tick.
Yeah.
So in the world of silver, you guys know silver likely better than anybody. What's a deal that's not your company, not an investment? Maybe it's an investment you have. What's something that you're not a part of that you like right now, or something new that you think, would be interesting, has caught your eye, let's say? It's not an investment recommendation, by the way, but some company, some deposit that is, it's caught your eye, something that's perked your attention.
No, it's not really, I'm not kind of fully impartial on this. I'm on the board of a company called Summa Silver, run by Galen McNamara.
That's cheating.
Okay, well then I won't say Mogollon in New Mexico.
Which is actually the first mining district I worked in as an exploration.
Interesting.
What's cool with that?
It was very kind of similar in a lot of ways to Panuco, with the many veins. I mean, I don't know how many kilometers of veins they've mapped out there, but there's tens and tens and tens of kilometers. But it's vastly underexplored from what I can see, and they're making some high grade samples. They've had some success with drilling, but I think if they are able to really get set up there properly with permitting and drill at a large scale, I think they're going to have a lot of success there.
One to watch.
You got me, because have
it's hard for you
silver under coverage. And I'm very focused on best of breed. I've got Western Alaska Minerals under coverage too, CRD in Alaska. And because I'm so selective on quality, I'm not scouring the world for silver opportunities. So I'm going to pass over to Peter.
Well,
I'll think a bit more.
Okay, think a bit more, but just maybe think of it.
I covered all the part.
What's one do you think maybe isn't getting the attention that maybe it deserves, or is it catching your eye and maybe just isn't as visible as one would think?
Yeah, on the pure silver plays, I mean, I really enjoyed meeting Reyna Silver, which Peter's daughter is very involved with, and multiple assets, high quality filtering and selection process, starting to get very, very good results. And that one stands out to me. Different models, high grade silver, CRD model, both Mexico and the US. And I need to do a site visit, I think, Peter. I've been having my arm twisted. So that's one I do a repeat update every year, and I'm impressed with the advancement. So I'd say that'd be the one that probably would be the one that has to be looked at a little bit more seriously, and probably is undervalued.
I'd add that one too, actually.
Yeah?
It's a great team.
Yeah. Peter, this is the one, buddy.
I've obviously spent most of my career in Mexico, and there's lots of good stuff in Mexico. It's hard to find something there or anywhere that I'm not somehow involved with. But about 3 years ago, I got brought into Bolivia with New Pacific, and it was a real eye-opener to me in terms of the size of the deposits. I mean, the world's second largest silver deposit, Cerro Rico, is in Bolivia, and the potential of Bolivia is tremendous. There's been a lot of focus on big, low-grade open pit operations, but it looks like the guys who have picked up San Cristobal are making some pretty high-grade discoveries nearby, and I think it's still private. I was going to mention that one too. But that one looks like it could be pretty exciting. I mean, I've always wondered where all that stuff where all the dispersed mineralization at San Cristobal came from, and wouldn't it be so nice if you could just concentrate it instead of having it blown out all over God's half acre?
Cool.
So it looks like maybe they've found something like a compact San Cristobal, and it's definitely one to keep your eye on.
And that's a private.
Yeah, it won't be private forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
They raised a huge amount of money for that privately, like a few years ago, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I think Quentin runs it, right?
Yeah.
When who?
Henning.
Quentin Henning.
Yeah.
So it was a long process, deal transaction with a lot of quite brilliant,
If you're
M&A.
seeing this, then if Quentin's got it, I mean, I've talked to him
They
enough.
bought it from a Japanese.
Bought it from Sumitomo.
Sumitomo, yeah.
Crazy. Oh, you got it from Sumitomo?
Yeah. It's a
Interesting.
huge resource too.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a lot of major companies or even mid-tier companies that still have fantastic assets that are just dormant in their inventories, or do you think a lot of them have been picked over?
I think they have them and they don't know they have them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some that have community relations issues. They're not insurmountable, but they're sequestered right now. And it could be a matter of the community getting a better agreement because there's another mine on the other side of the hill that's very big and paying out large payments. There's a few examples of those. But yeah, I think there probably are some, as Peter says, ones that they don't have the expertise to really understand the model that is at work,
or they may have the expertise, but they just don't have the bandwidth to keep
fair enough.
bringing them forward. That the big companies tend to be producers; they tend to stick to their production, and the pressure to find something that can be brought into production short term sort of overwhelms the companies, and so a lot of these things just never rise to the surface to get the attention they deserve.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking. I was talking to one of the major companies here yesterday. I won't name it, I don't know if just cause, but they were saying that their global or their exploration budget, I guess is global exploration budget, was 350,000 or 350 million.
You can't buy beer for your geology team for 350,000.
No,
that's right. 350 million. Obviously, 350 million. No, it's 350 million, which I found kind of shocking. In some ways, for a large company of that size, with that many operations and that many things, it just doesn't seem like very much. Because you have to replace what you mined yesterday.
Michael, what could you do with 350 million?
We could build a mine.
No, obviously it's concentrated on one thing, but they're not concentrating on one thing. You're a global, like if you've got 20 assets around the world operating, and you've got exploration teams at each asset. Let's say,
brownfield budgets,
and then you have an global exploration team that has some up and coming things. By the time you spread that 350 million around, it's really not a lot on every nucleus.
And that's why our end of the junior side of the business exists, because we're more efficient. We're supposed to be more efficient explorers. We have that desire, that burning desire to make a discovery. If you're an employee, I'm not saying for everybody, but if you're an employee in a big company, you don't get the same kind of, personal benefits through wealth creation of a discovery or even the accolades, So I think in a lot of ways, it is a healthy system that we have here, where you have the junior end of the market that's incentivized, through, I suppose it's a way of crowdfunding, getting equity from the public to make discoveries. Otherwise, it would be,
it's that R&D that emulates the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, and then the nimble entrepreneurial R&D firms, which is much like our sector. The senior mining companies probably 15 years ago really pruned down, to your point, the number of countries they were in, number of regional offices, and tried to outsource it to juniors in some ways, kind of centralized things. They went for bigger assets and looked for the juniors to find the new discoveries in large measure.
And Clive was talking about this with B2 at our Vancouver mining event there, and he's talking about the recent investment in Snowline, and the return of Tech used to do this all the time too. Tech was a meaningful investor in junior companies, and that has kind of gone away in the last little while here, where majors actually haven't taken as big of a role in the junior exploration world, in terms of equity.
Agnico's been relatively consistent there, but I agree. It's the seniors have not been as supportive. Some of the intermediate companies, certainly Alamos, New Gold, have been fairly active with strategic investments, which is important in our current market.
Yeah, there's not a lot of other sources of capital in here.
Yeah, well, that's a real thing, and I wonder if it's going to come back the same way it was with us before in the last run. I wonder if the generalist if the retail person has the same, nest egg that they're worth, that they used to sort of, their play money that they used to sort of invest in junior mining stocks with, to try to, if that's still available.
That kind of money, over time, that money comes and goes, and it may be away at the moment, but in one way or another, it'll come back. It won't look exactly the same, but it'll be back in one way or another. It's just the risk reward equation is just so high. I mean, it's the casino money that comes in and out, and the moment it's attracted by some other bright, shiny object over there.
Yep.
Once you've had your head handed to you on a plate a couple of times by investing in the flavor of the day that loses its flavor like chewing gum, you come back to something that has long-term value, and especially with the whole world of alternate energy and how do you transition to the future energy of the world, which is going to involve a lot of silver and a lot of other elements that people don't even recognize where they come from or where they have to come from. And the fact that if you want that, you're going to have to let people look for it, and you have to let people mine it.
Well, I believe that's true. I believe that holds true for all the things, I think, in today's day and age, we've seen an explosion of quality of life of people around the world. There's the number of people living above poverty line has been improving exponentially. And people buy stuff. I mean, this is globalization. We're just a society of stuff, and we're exporting that concept. And it doesn't matter where you go. I mean, I know when I was in Ghana for so many years, and I remember first showing up in Ghana, and there was literally like very few cars on the road, or if there was, they were they're all beaten up and old, and they had trotros and stuff like this that were basically, their bodies were rotted out and replaced with wood. And fast forward 3 or 4 years, traffic jams, unbelievable traffic jams in Accra. It was huge. It was crazy. And everyone had a car. And you go, okay, well, that's Ghana, right? Well, it's the same in China. It's the same everywhere else. People are buying stuff. And it's not just the weird stuff. It's not just the techie stuff. It's also the gold, the all of it, And so I think it's silver. I think it's gold. I think it's base metals. I think it's the obscure things. There's just so much going on. And in order for this world if we keep on this pace in the next kind of 20 to 30 years, it's going to take a hell of a lot of mining. So.
Yeah, and I think the governments are starting to get that. The critical minerals tailwind, in particular in Canada and the US, I'm most familiar with. The governments are now starting to realize mining is essential. And they're starting to carve out parts of budgets to deploy. Canada, $3.8 billion for infrastructure, for projects, for consultation to speed up the permitting process. Same thing down in the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act and the U.S. Department of Defense deploying capital especially to encourage some of the permitting timelines. So I think that we're fortunate, even though the sentiment's not the greatest right now. And there's the have and have not projects. I think we are very fortunate to have that tailwind.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's a global phenomenon this time around.
Yeah.
The last time was China driven, right? Which is, population exploding and going into, new technology, new way of living, things like that. But this is a global phenomenon here where, the world governments are saying, we want to decarbonize, we want to switch to alternative energy sources. And you can't have that transition without silver. It's just impossible. You need that for solar panels.
Yeah, there's a lot with the solar panels, especially, right?
And the deficit. Now, Silver Institute does great work. I'm very fascinated by the supply and demand equation for silver, because we have we have the world record deficit now in silver as in recorded history. And the price of silver hasn't necessarily moved in the way that you might expect with this deficit, but I suspect that's coming. But even if it doesn't move, mines like Panuco and Juanicipio and others, are there to kind of, supply the world with the silver that it needs. But it's one of the most important metals of all, copper, lithium, but silver is never really kind of considered one of these energy transition metals, I think.
Certainly is. It's an incredible conductor, and it's
the best.
Yeah.
It just happens to oxidize.
Yeah.
Which is its only downside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's why you go for grade. I mean, we'll have fluctuations in the price, we'll have fluctuations in the demand. So you go for something that's got high enough grade, it's going to survive any market conditions and big enough to survive several market cycles. And if you invest in that, you can sleep at night when prices aren't what you'd like to see and party all night when the prices are better than that. So that's one of the reasons for going for grade.
And I know you guys don't have an economic study out there, but we've kind of, gone ahead and, look at model you guys at $10 an ounce, all sustaining costs, silver equivalent. I mean, that's the type of project you're speaking about that can withstand the ups and downs.
I met some folks from San Dimas, from the old history of San Dimas, and that was the message. A mine like San Dimas, you pay the bills when times are okay. Everyone gets stinking rich when times are good. For those few years.
Yeah,
and I think that's hopefully what we're looking at here with Panuco. Yeah.
Super cool. Any concerns about Mexico politically, stability-wise? I mean, some people may say, given the world events, politics, what's happening, there's, mass immigration coming through from Panama, from Guatemala, other places like that, up and through Mexico. Is there any concerns like that jurisdictionally there, or? I mean, you guys obviously would be inclined to say no, but I mean, has it changed at all? Like, has it?
Well, Peter would be the expert.
It's changed dramatically. With the current administration, and but we're down to the last year of the current administration. We know two things for sure about what will happen politically in Mexico. In a year and a bit, the current administration will be out, and Mexico will have its first woman president, because both of the candidates running for president of Mexico are women, and one of them is on the sort of center right, one's on the center left, and it remains to be seen what happens.
So both centrists, though, at least.
They both seem to be reasonably centrist, yes.
Yeah.
But it's politicians are politicians wherever you are. They tell you what they think you want to hear long enough to get your vote, and then they reveal their true self. So,
but socially, things are okay. Like, is it?
Mexico, the economy is booming. The peso, for reasons that I don't entirely understand, has gone from 24 back to 17 of the dollar, which costs us, but it's a measure of the strength of the Mexican economy, with the nearshoring, with all these companies that went to Indonesia and China with their manufacturing and have now come back to Mexico. So that's where a lot of the economic boom is coming from in Mexico. But of course, that all needs natural resources to feed it, and that draws people from the countryside into the urban areas. And one of the beauties of mining is that it provides an economic anchor in the rural areas, so that you don't wind up driving into a town that has only a few children and old people in it because everybody else is left.
Yeah.
Good point.
So, mining actually has the potential to stabilize some of that urban flight that you see in Mexico.
I was really, really impressed. I went to Zacatecas. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And wow, like, it's cool to see the the rural side of it too, like all the mining history, Durango, all that.
Yeah.
But by and large, Zacatecas was really impressive. I mean,
you have to come to Sinaloa. Sinaloa is beautiful. What I didn't actually say when I was talking about the story of going down there is that both Craig and I, having been to Mexico many times myself, but never to Sinaloa. There was a bit of trepidation around, Sinaloa cartels and all these things. You get there, it's an incredible state.
Safe. Everybody's, it's like
industrious too. I mean, the agriculture there is enormous. Tomatoes from Culiacan and the area, but it's an industrious state that really wants business. And we've sat down with the Secretary of Economy recently. He actually came to our project and saw our health fair, which we do for the communities there, and communities supportive. The state is supportive. Mexico is a great place to do business. I love being a part of Mexico in that sense.
Yeah, in 45 minutes you can be on the beach in Mazatlan.
That could be a part of it. Cold Pacifico and a few tacos, that could be a bit of it too. But
I think I certainly I've been to some shady corners of the world myself, and look at I had presuppositions of what Mexico was like. I had aversions to to operating or investing. These are just stigmas, right? Like that surround some certain places in the world, and that was one of them for me. And I went there, and it was totally like, wow, okay, this is not what I thought at all. This is way safe. This is a very good jurisdiction to be working in. I'm sure there's places where
how did you go from Mogollon, New Mexico? How did you start working in Mexico?
People I was working with, this is back in the late 70s, before anybody cared about silver and gold. And so I was working for a small consulting group, working in Mogollon, also working in Mexico. And then when silver and gold popped, thanks to the Hunt brothers, they lost their consulting contract with a major mining company, who decided they would bring it inside themselves. They could hunt for these things themselves. Wound up going to work almost immediately for Kennecott, who surprisingly were looking at the Bolaños epithermal vein system in the middle of the state of Jalisco. And from there went from Bolaños to the Pánuco district. So in 1980, we were out there pounding the rocks in the Pánuco district. They didn't have Copala, and they pulled the plug on us before we ever got any drill holes in it. But ultimately, the work we did in Bolaños resulted in the discovery of a major blind, totally unknown ore body, huge vein.
Wow.
So that's part of what clicked for me long term was, you can make huge discoveries. The old saw is in the shadow of the head frame. You just need to know what you're looking for.
Interesting.
Great. Well, anything we want to leave with the listeners, or I think we're pretty good here, guys. Hey, it's been a good sit down.
It'd be interesting, just the creative relationship in terms of investing between Vizsla Silver and Prismo. Our firm was involved, in this in terms of disclosure. Not myself personally, but I think that's one of the creative ways to advance exploration and have synergies.
And thank you for that. Thank you to you and Scott and the Agentis team, and really appreciate it. So it's an incredible opportunity for us to be a shareholder of Prismo, and then to have this technical committee. Our vice president of exploration, Jesus Velador, is an old friend of Peter's from.
I've known him since he was 8.
Yeah. So
his dad used to work for me.
So it's really cool for us to have that opportunity to bring that together at this district. But thank you again for you guys for facilitating that.
Yeah, I mean, and the cooperation that it represents, and the ability and the recognition that to be able to go in and explore the district as a consolidated unit to try to understand, the overall system. That's going to redound to the benefit of both companies. Obviously, Vizsla more because you have more of the district. But for me, it's just fun to be able to approach a district on that kind of basis. So
I like the scalability too, with multiple veins you could be mining at the same time, filling a mill, and maybe scaling up. That's certainly our view. And this is another vein that you can be filling in a central processing facility.
Well, and my view is that we have that center of mass, of course, in the west with Copala, and that's by nature of us exploring there, right? It's not by no means the only place with mineralization. We know it's not the only place with mineralization, but I suspect that in the future we'll have multiple, including up in the eastern part of the district where Prismo is active.
That's what a mining district means.
Yeah.
You have multiple mines
in
the same geologic genetic environment. So
owning the whole thing as opposed to being fragmented.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. So you guys glued your data together effectively, and your technical teams together, like created a explain that. Sorry,
it's a technical committee that we have. I wouldn't say that every decision's made jointly, but there's a compilation of information and cooperation.
Yeah, and sort of intellectual foment to feed off of each other and come up with new ideas for exploring and lather, rinse, repeat, and make more discoveries.
Amazing.
And have fun while we're doing it too.
Data without borders.
Yeah.
There you go. Nice. I like it. That's what makes it tick. Thank you very, very much, and the best of luck to everybody in your pursuits and discoveries and all of that. And thank you so much for coming on today and sitting down and having this chat. I wish we could keep it going and all that, but it's beer o'clock here at Beaver Creek.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marty.
Good job.
Yeah,
Cheers.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you.